Hello and welcome to another video podcast. I'm Pastor Jeff Glenn, and it's my pleasure to take you through the Word each week. We are getting ready to finish up Genesis. We're in chapter 49 today, and we've just come out of chapter 48 where we see that Jacob has blessed Joseph's sons right before his death. And we move into chapter 49, and we see that Jacob is now right before his death. He's getting gathering together the sons of Jacob to bless them. He begins with this really some clarity at the end of his life about who he was and who he is. It's a great moment of encouragement for all of us that's all of our walks with the Lord is we have a moment of clarity, knowing that we were someone previous before our encounter with Jesus, and that encounter has changed us. We see that in verse 2. We'll start in verse 1, though. It says, "And Jacob called his sons together and said, 'Gather together, that I may tell you what shall befall you in the last days. Gather together and hear, you sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel, your father.'" Now, these aren't two different people. This is the same person. Jacob and Israel are the same person. But what he seems to be acknowledging here is that his sons were as his person of Jacob. Remember Jacob as the heel catcher and the one who wrestled with God, and after the wrestling with God became called by God Israel. And so this is the same person. And so Jacob is on his deathbed, blessing his sons. And really, it's more of prophecy over who they will become after he's dead. But in this moment of gathering them together, he's acknowledging who he was before he came to acknowledge the Lord as ruling over him. And then now who he is now, that he is governed by God after being wrestling with God. And so a great moment of clarity for all of us, that we did have a moment where we wanted what we wanted for ourselves, and we would do whatever we thought was necessary to get that. And then a moment where we're like, okay, Lord, I'm going to give my life to you. And if you haven't come to that moment where you now are governed by God, this is the time to do that. But so for us, we see in this moment here, as we talked about last week, it's a great moment where the Lord is providing for his promise. And so in these blessings here, he goes through each of his sons and gives them prophecy and blessing over what will to come for them. So Reuben, the firstborn, the first physically to come out of the womb, he calls him, he says, "My might and the beginning of my strength, and the excellency and dignity and of power." But then he says, "You're unstable as water, and you shall not excel." And so if you just picture this image of water being spilled, and it just kind of goes everywhere, and it's not controlled or contained. And this is what he's saying of Reuben. He's saying, you're not going to excel because your character is unstable. And he talks about the fact that he slept with his concubine. And then he goes to Simeon and Levi, and he talks about them as violent, self-willed men. They're the ones, you remember, who killed Hamor and Shechem over the incident with Shechem and Dinah. And so again, these are violent and self-willed men. It doesn't put them outside of the family, but what it does is it sort of gives them, takes them out of leadership. It takes them out of that place of prominence. And all of these prophecies you'll see come to pass, especially in Exodus, when they start coming out of the land, and you start to see the numbers of the tribes and how influential they are and how much they get mentioned. But Simeon and Levi, this also another a picture of this, the structure of the leadership of Israel through the 12 tribes being divided. So a decentralization of this power structure being designated by God, and generally ends up pretty well for Israel as a whole. Then he comes into Judah. And we know Judah didn't have a great track record. We know that Judah and Tamar, his daughter-in-law, he had lustful personality, and he acted on that with Tamar, who presented herself to him as a prostitute and became pregnant by him. But then he seemed to have redeemed himself when considering going back to Israel at the request of Joseph, telling Jacob, for Benjamin's sake, I will put myself as Benjamin's guarantee that Benjamin will come out of the land safe, that we'll be able to go to Israel and back safe. Otherwise, you might as well kill me too. And so this seems to have redeemed Judah, because Judah does get the lion's share of the blessing, in that his brothers would praise him. It says here, Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He bows down. He lies down as a lion who shall rouse him. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet. So this scepter, this image of power and authority, it says here in verse 10, the scepter shall not depart from Judah. And man, what a great promise that the Lord is giving to Judah here, that this the power of the Lord in establishing Israel will not depart from Judah. So meaning that the Messiah will come through the line of Judah. And then we come into the other brothers and giving them some interesting prophecies. Zebulun shall have a haven by the sea, and Issachar is a strong donkey. And so I'm not sure that I would necessarily feel blessed if I was called a strong donkey, but this is a blessing for Issachar here, that the blessing of the strength of the Lord being as of a donkey, the one who could bear many burdens and be useful. Dan being the judge of his people as one of the tribes, but then also this a judge of his people and a serpent by the way. This indication of again Dan being a little bit of a thorn for his people, and then Gad, a troop shall trample upon him. So this interaction between Dan and Gad, not necessarily being there's division here, and there's rivalry here, and so we move on into Asher, who it says that the bread from Asher shall be rich, and he shall yield royal dainties, and so this idea of Asher being provision and blessing for the tribes. And then Naphtali, who is as it says in verse 21, is a deer let loose. He uses beautiful words, and so again some more blessing and some good imagery there. And Joseph, a fruitful bough by a well. His branches run over the wall. Again, abundance, and but then also in there some division, and so also, as verse 23 says, the archers have bitterly grieved him, shot at him and hated him, but his bow remained in strength. And so this idea, there's contention within these families, these tribes, as Israel grows into a nation, but there's always, as it says here in verse 24, by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob, from there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel, by the God of your father who will help you, and by the Almighty who will bless you with the blessings of heaven above, blessings of deep that lies beneath. And so this idea that all of this blessing, but conflict and striving, but is also the Lord's almighty hand there to bless them as they continue to grow. And then we end up with Benjamin, who is as a ravenous wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. And so this idea of Benjamin being, mighty and strong. And then Jacob's he passes away. He gives them instruction. Hey, I don't want to be buried here again in Egypt. I want to be buried at the cave of Machpelah, which his son did honor. He wanted to be gathered together with his wife Sarah, and with Isaac and Rebekah, and those of his family. So this idea of being gathered back together in the land of Israel, again, great picture of the Lord's blessing and providence through those hard things. And so it's an encouragement for us that we don't need to be perfect, that the Lord has promise and blessing through his word. And so until next week, stay encouraged and stay in the word.